Good afternoon, live from ZTN studios in Harare, Zimbabwe. Welcome to the Mint Special Economic Panorama. Our virtual discussion this afternoon, COVID-19 second wave, perspectives from workers and the informal sector. Hello, I'm your host, Andy Hodges. This broadcast is brought to you by Zimpaper's TV network ZTN and our partners, the Labour and Economic Development Research Institute of Zimbabwe, Ledriz. Please also tune into Economic Panorama live on Capi Talk every Thursday afternoon at 3 p.m. If you have any comments or views on our program this afternoon, please feel free to contact us via our Facebook page, Zimpaper's TV network, or via our Twitter handle at ZTN News. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused a global health crisis, which has rapidly transformed into economic and labor market shocks that have in turn led to a global job crisis of unprecedented magnitude. The ILO estimates that, assuming a situation without any alternative income sources, lost labor income will result in an increase in relative poverty for informal workers and their families of more than 21% in upper middle income countries, 52% in high-income countries, and 56% in lower and low-income countries. Today we discuss the implications of the COVID-19 second wave and the national response on workers and the informal economy. We also take stock of our COVID-19 national response from a labour, informal and SME perspective. And to help us do this, we have a panel comprising of Honourable Chido Madiwa. She's chairperson of Zimbabwe's Parliamentary Portfolio Committee on Women Affairs, Community and SMEs Development. Peter Mutasa is president of the Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions, and Samuel Wadzai, executive director at the Vendors Initiative for Social and Economic Transformation, VISET. Honourable Chido, given that 76% of total employment in the country is effective, critics have argued that lockdowns only flatten the economy, including livelihoods, especially in developing countries, instead of flattening the curve. So let me ask you this. How effective are lockdowns, given that most citizens simply can't afford to stay home? And what has been the impact of the lockdowns on this lockdowns being caused by the second wave on small and medium enterprises and their workers?
Thank you, Andy, for that. Honestly, it's true. COVID-19 has made survival harder for everyone. In as much as we are taking it into consideration that the whole lockdown is in the interest of our public, but of course it has affected our economy, considering that, for example, our economy is driven by the informal sector, and the informal sector, and maybe let me also say the smallest SMEs are run by women and operate in the informal sector. But the lockdown has affected the livelihoods because there's a lot of trade disruptions, travel bans, closure of borders, and low remittances. So at the end of the day, this is the economy that is driven by the informal sector, and the lockdown means there's a lot of disturbance as we look at how the informal sector trades. So it's true. The economy has been affected, livelihoods have been affected by the lockdown.
So, but Chido, let me ask you this though. I mean, you know, it's very hard to expect vendors and SMEs to stay at home during a lockdown when really them going out to work or going onto the streets to sell their wares is their only form of income. So as a result, the lockdown actually increases their poverty level and increases their ability to actually support their families. I mean, so how can you expect vendors in the informal sector to maintain a lockdown in that kind of scenario?
Yeah, of course. If you are to look at some of what government has been doing in terms of assisting vendors, there is a lot of intervention in terms of trying to formalize the informal sector, because of course, as we are talking about the lockdown, there is the large enterprises in the economy. There are some exemptions for some kind of businesses to operate. and the whole effort was being done towards formalizing the informal sector, so that as we talk of exemption, because the exemption looks at the safety measures in the face of COVID-19. How safe is it to operate a small business? But of course, it's also a challenge, because everyone has come is now in the informal sector. You look at someone selling tomatoes here and there. They want to continue doing business, but how safe is it is? It's a challenge, of course. But let me say, government has been trying by all means to make sure that the informal sector is formalized.
Peter, let me come to you. How, in your view, has the second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic affected not just the Zimbabwean economy, but more principally your workers that you represent? How are they coping during this lockdown? And do you believe that the level 4 lockdown announced by the government was an appropriate response to the second wave? Peter?
The pandemic, every country is facing the same crisis, but our response is local. So when we analyze the impact and how we have responded, we need to look local as well. So the first thing that I need to point out is we were fortunate in that in the first wave, we were not heavily affected like in other countries. So we had ample time to prepare. We also had with
So, Peter, we appear to be having a bit of an issue with your sound.
Is that so?
Yeah, okay. Please try again, because we're just having a little
how
bit
about now?
Yes, that's better. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So I was saying the pandemic is global. Every other country is affected, but the response is local. The bulk of the response is local. So we need to analyze it from how we have responded. If we look at how we have responded, we need to take into account that we're fortunate in that in the first wave, we did not, were not affected heavily like in other countries like South Africa. So we had ample time to sit down, to come up with a response that is robust, to deal with issues that we had to deal with. Unfortunately, we did not do that. We did not see what South Africa did when President Ramaphosa called opposition leaders and they together sounded out to the nation that we need an inclusive and collective response. So we didn't see the president locally talking to opposition. We also didn't see the president locally talking to civic society, like we saw, for example, in South Africa, Namibia, to an extent in Botswana. We also didn't see no dialogue with other stakeholders, the experts, the scientists. So we missed that opportunity. Had we done that, we should be better prepared for the second wave. As Labour, we had a dialogue, a tripartite negotiating forum. We sounded out a lot of issues and picked up urgent issues. For example, the issue about reprioritizing our expenditure as a country and ensure that we make sure that our health service delivery receives sufficient support in terms of PPEs for the workers in the health services, delivery services. We also were supposed to uplift our hospitals to ensure that we have got more ICUs, more ventilators, and more equipment and more drugs. So we, as a nation, we can take a blame. We thought the first wave has come and it has gone and we are somehow insulated and we slept. Now the second wave has come and is so serious. Unfortunately, again, our response to the second wave has been similar to the first response. It is only taking police into the streets, taking the military into the neighborhoods. So we are just focusing on the lockdown. But a lockdown on its own will not assist us. We should have seen the lockdown coming together with more testing. We are talking about 30,000 cases, which reflects our level of testing capabilities and what we've done so far.
Peter, can I ask you though, Peter, before we get into that, can I ask you directly? I mean, the level lockdown, the level 4 lockdown obviously impacts workers in a large way. So what specifically during now are your workers suffering because of the COVID-19 lockdown, or particularly this lockdown now that we're in now due to the second wave?
So the lockdown has been clearly used, the COVID has been weaponized, and the lockdown has come mainly and affected, firstly, the fundamental rights of people. We've heard reports of workers who have been abused at entry points. There's not been clarity in terms of what letters are needed for people to have passage into their workplaces. So that's the first issue. The second issue is the majority of companies have reduced the workforce. Many workers are at home and some are working at home, but the majority are not even attending to work. Those workers have also lost in incomes. We have not, as a nation, come up with income protection measure like we saw in South Africa, where all those who are not receiving their incomes are assisted by the unemployment insurance fund and also employers. We've also not seen like what has happened in Namibia, where there was a moratorium that employers should continue to pay workers and government will assist business. So many workers are starving in their homes. Okay. We also have issues to do with job losses. What employers have been doing since the first lockdown was to cut on the workers, especially those who are on contracts with a limit of time.
Okay.
The majority of them being women, the majority of them being the young workers. So workers have lost employment.
All right. Peter, let me cross across to Samuel because I want to hear his views. We're joined now by Samuel Wadzai from the Vendors Initiative for Social and Economic Transformation. Of course, we did mention that the informal economy is 76% of total employment in Zimbabwe. Samuel, welcome to the Mint Special. Samuel, let me ask you the same question I asked Peter Mutasa. How have your members been affected by the lockdown and how are they coping during this lockdown? Because, of course, a lot of the informal sector needs to work on a daily basis. They survive hand to mouth. So how are they managing to survive in this period? And can they really be asked to stay at home when it's about the survival not just of themselves but also of their families? Your comment?
Indeed. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, sir. Please go ahead.
So, let me be very clear, and this is a very, very, very difficult period for the informal sector. Look, this is a total shutdown to the informal sector. Very few people have been allowed to continue operating, and 90% of the players in the informal economy are under total shutdown. They cannot operate whatsoever. So what this basically means is that people are not able to put food on the table. We put it at over 90% of the population of the country that is surviving through the informal economy. So when the country is shut down, it means the majority of the people are not able to put food on the table. Why I'm saying this is a precarious situation, we would have expected as the informal sector some form of support if we are to say we are closing the economy totally. We would have expected the government to come in, provide some safety nets for the players in the informal economy, because that's where the majority are surviving. And one key point, and is also that if we want these lockdowns to be effective, the government should come in and support the vulnerable of our communities. And the vulnerable of our communities, the majority are found in the informal economy. Even if we say there are a few that were allowed to operate, given the curfew, the 3 o'clock, the time that people are allowed to be working, it's not even viable even for those that are allowed to be operating at the moment. So our suggestion as the informal economy is that the government should treat a certain section of the informal economy and categorize them under essential services providers. Because if you are saying that over 70% of the population is surviving through the informal economy, what it basically means is that everyone or the economy has become informalized. So the informal sector has become the economy. That should be the basis of our argument here.
All right,
so if we agree that the informal economy is the economy, the government should be seen to be supporting the sector. When we are putting in place lockdowns like this, there should be a way of giving them a space to operate. Not everyone. I'm saying a certain section of the informal economy should be allowed to operate, because we are all in agreement that our economy is now heavily informalized.
All right, let me cross across to Chido. Chido, I want to build on what both Samuel and Peter were talking about in terms of wage protection. I want to give you a little bit of comparison to other countries. A number of countries have set up, for example, wage support specifically targeted to SMEs. That's in Brazil, and the government is paying part of the salaries for micro and small companies. In Canada, small business owners receive a temporary wage subsidy equal to 10% of their salary bill for a period of 3 months. An emergency fund in Korea has been set up to provide direct financial support to SMEs and the self-employed, aimed at encouraging firms to keep their employees. Now, these are some of the interventions that have been carried out in other countries around the world. So let me ask you straight then, what protection has been put in place by the government? And as the portfolio committee chairperson, what would you recommend to the government to put in place now? And do you think that some of the interventions put in other countries can be utilized or put in place here in Zimbabwe?
Thank you, Andy, for that for the question. Let me surely admit that it is important to make sure that government does something to protect those who are in the informal sector. But let's also appreciate, in as much as we have other governments, other countries, like you have mentioned, the other countries that are doing what you can say a lot in assisting people in the informal sector as compared to us. But let me also, before I mention what our government is doing, to the effort that the government is doing to protect those in the informal sector, let's also appreciate that we cannot also compare our economy to those economies. For example, we have had the very destructive cyclones. We have had droughts. We are coming. The government is a new dispensation, and a lot is being put in place, which needs financial resources. But all the same, government has done its part in terms of trying to cushion the informal sector, for example, through the Ministry of Public Service and Social Welfare. There's the payment of social grants, which is continuing. In as much as I can say, maybe we can also ask the government to kind of increase the amount of these grants and to make sure that these are timeously paid to the beneficiaries. But the government has continued issuing, cushioning the informal sector through these grants. And also government and partners, they have been directing funds for the construction of safe workplaces with work going on in major cities, and the capacity building programs on the adoption of e-commerce that have been rolled out to members of the informal sector and SMEs across the country. So, and all the same, in as much as I've talked about exemption of certain kind of businesses, in the same situation, there is the issuing of exemption letters to those that qualify as essential services in line with the lockdown order. It is continuing for the in as much as, and I said, it's not easy for the informal sector, because those that have been formalized and those that meet the criteria for operating in a safety environment are still very limited and very low.
Right.
But so it's not like the government is seated. Of course, there's a chairperson who also carry out oversight on the very departments that are doing this work to find out how best they are doing to assist these SMEs. And this is somehow kind of the interventions that government is doing to assist those in.
Thank you. Thank you. Peter, you've heard, I gave you a list there of what other countries are doing. I used the examples of Brazil, Canada, and Korea. In terms of putting in measures to protect workers and initiatives against, obviously, some of the hardships caused by the COVID-19 and the COVID-19 second wave. So, and you heard there what Chido said. So what would your organization recommend, or what have they put forward to government now in an effort to protect Zimbabwean workers?
Thank you. And firstly, I want to say Zimbabwe is not poor. In response to the Honorable MP, Zimbabwe is not poor. We have had the Minister of Finance and Economic Development spent 2 years talking about surpluses. The government has made surpluses, and surpluses are a form of saving. So in a crisis like now, we need to see the surpluses saving lives. There's no sane person who can have savings and fail to save their children and fail to save their families in a time of need where there's danger staring at their families. Secondly, even though we have our own challenges, and admittedly we already had an economy in crisis, although government was refusing or not accepting that we have got a crisis. But we do not have a crisis of dialogue. What we have are people with diversity. So other countries have managed to get where they are and to come up with responsive measures that are sufficient or that are effective because they had dialogue. The Honorable Member of Parliament cannot tell us that even if we have no money, we cannot sit down with doctors, with nurses, with teachers, with unions and business and MPs and the executive to discuss how best we can.
Peter, I appreciate it. I mean, I think you're saying that social dialogue is not really happening at the moment between government and the various sectors. But let's assume that you could sit down with the government and you could sit down with them today. What would you put on the table? What would you recommend government to do to ensure that your workers are protected and that there is some form of social net?
The first thing that we would want government to acknowledge is that we are going to win through social dialogue. So that's the very first thing. We don't want to have knee-jerk reactions to policy making. We need to sit down and have dialogue. Secondly, we need to have a four but interrelated policy responses. The first one is there's dire need to stimulate the economy and demand for labor. And we need to use available fiscal and monetary tools and the surpluses that we have to put relief into businesses, to put money into the pockets of citizens. So we need to urgently have public investment in health services. That is crucial. We need to protect our health services workers. Already 3,000 health service workers have been infected. Secondly, we need to provide immediate assistance to sustain business enterprises, especially the small to medium enterprises. We need that to preserve livelihoods and jobs.
So, Peter, it appears then that you're calling for, let's call it a second stimulus package. Are you encouraging government then to issue a second stimulus package similar to the one they issued last year, the 18 billion Zimbabwe dollars?
Government didn't issue any stimulus package. Whom did you see who benefited from the first 19 billion? We have not seen anyone from the small to medium enterprises saying they've really benefited. In the businesses, we are already negotiating in collective bargaining. Companies are telling us that they did not benefit. Okay. If it went to few, then there are the few connected elites. So we are calling for a real stimulus package that ensures that we give at least the food poverty line for the vulnerable 1 million households that the government had identified, and not the 300, which was only equivalent to 3 loaves of bread. We also need to ensure that we protect those who are coming to work. Workers in agriculture, workers in domestic sector, workers, security guards, every worker who is in the front line has to be protected. We are seeing workers are not protected. Even the transport mode that we are using, people are congested in Zupco. The Zupcos are few. When we social distance at home and at work, we then come and we are pegged like we are beans in a tin.
All right, Peter, I have to ask Samuel the same question. Samuel, I'd like to ask you the similar question because you know we've talked about what the situation is now, the effect of the lockdowns on the vendors, in particular in the informal sector. But let's talk about concrete actions. What have you proposed? What have you put on the table that you're trying to present to government? You have the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee chairperson here who actually looks after this portfolio in the Zimbabwean Parliament. What would you say to her? What would you recommend to her to consider in her committee to recommend to government?
Okay. Thank you so much, Andy. I've got 3. Of course, there are a lot of proposals, but we're going to put 3 on the table so that we're able to monitor and move. The first one, let's quickly institute the cushioning fund. I'm talking about the provision of social security, the provision of social safety net for those that are vulnerable, those that are not able to look after themselves because they are under lockdown. We need to quickly institute this and support people and give people money to survive. Other countries have managed to do that. Mkoma Peter talked about Namibia, South Africa, and other countries have managed to do that. The government need to immediately institute this fund. Secondly, we need to have a stimulus package which is inclusive. The first phase of the stimulus package that you are talking about, the 18 billion, if you move around all the small to medium enterprise, corporations in Harare, throughout the country, in Bulawayo, and ask people if there's anyone who benefited from that fund, it will be very, very difficult to find a single person who confirm that they benefited from that fund. So I've said it should be inclusive stimulus package. Inclusive will mean there should be information to everyone who wants to benefit from that package. People should know where to go to seek that package. They should know the guidelines to be followed to apply, if one is to apply, to be part and parcel of that package.
We do understand that the government, it started at $300 social protection package, it moved to $800, and I understand that the government, we interviewed the minister 2 weeks ago, he announced that the government is considering an increase of 1,500 Zimbabwe dollars social protection cover, which of course may be below what your members may want, but at least it's a step in the right direction. Chido, I want to ask you 2 questions actually. My first question, of course, is that you've heard the comments from both Peter and Samuel about the fact that they can't find anybody in their sectors who actually benefited from the 18 billion stimulus package. In fact, they're implying that the stimulus package was on paper only and wasn't effective in terms of what it was supposed to do by the government. That's my first question. My second question is, critics have said that the government is reacting to what's happening, and they don't appear to have a clear action plan, not just for now, but also for what happens after the COVID-19 lockdowns. What would be your comment to both those questions?
Thank you, NT, for those. Of course, I've been listening to what my colleagues were their contributions in terms of what government and what interventions can be in place. To start with, one of the contributors mentioned about dialogue, and I'm not sure what dialogue in what context. Maybe that one has to be cleared. I didn't understand because, as for example, as a portfolio committee on women affairs on SMEs, we are open for contributions. We are open for any ideas, and as we as we hold our meetings, for example, public hearings, everyone is welcome. And this is the kind of platform whereby anyone with a contribution towards how best we can help our SMEs. For example, as Parliament, we are very open. We don't say no. We don't want to listen to this one. We want to listen to this one. So maybe if I'm kind of lost, I need to be guided there. And of course, in terms of the resources not enough, these are some of the contributions that can be coming to us to say, okay, the money that is being issued is not enough. And then we work together to say how best can we ask the government to make sure that whatever is coming to those in the informal sector, at least help them out.
But Chido, can I ask you though? Chido, can I ask you this? I mean, in the 18 billion stimulus package, the government put aside, I believe, $500 million in terms of support for SMEs. I believe it was to be done through banks or through issuing of some form of guarantee structure. But according to Peter and according to Samuel, nothing has been distributed to anybody that they know of. So can you give us, do you know any statistics? Did any of SMEs, because of course they are under your portfolio in Parliament, do you know of any SMEs that actually managed to access the stimulus package? Or was the stimulus package just on paper and a number that government announced without real teeth, so to speak?
Okay. 500, for example, if I'm to look at the SMEDCO allocation, in 2020 it was 90 million and it has been increased to 500 million. And offhand, I might not be able to give you the statistics, and we are talking of the population that is supposed to benefit from this kind of allocation, and say, do we expect everyone to kind of say, if you walk across in Harare, everyone will say, I've benefited from this. Let's also try to be very realistic to say, we are talking of 76% of our population, of our economy, a greater percentage of our economy being driven by the informal sector. And what's the kind of population? If you are talking in terms of population, how many people are we talking about? So it's like kind of almost everyone is in the informal sector. And to say you want to see to kind of ask everyone to say, yeah, everyone is
okay, but honorable, I'm not here talking about social protection. I mean, there was specific money earmarked for SMEs. So surely that kind of data, that isn't 14 million people, that kind of data should be available, because we have tried to find out who actually benefited from the stimulus package, and it appears that everybody we speak to has no idea, and they're actually denying any knowledge that any of their members or anybody they know received it. So surely we should be able to find out if that money went to the SMEs and if it was effective in keeping them open and keeping them viable, especially during the course of the last half of 2020.
And these are some of the questions now that should be brought forward to us as a committee that is oversight over that government department which is supposed to be handling those funds. So, like I'm saying, the committee is open for that kind of contribution, for those kind of questions, so that, because we have the mandate to ask where the funds are, we have the mandate to say, how did you spend these funds? So we are open for that kind of for those kind of contributions and ideas. It's well taken, and you will make a follow-up.
All right, thank you. You're watching the Mint Special Economic Panorama, our virtual discussion this afternoon, COVID-19 second wave, perspectives from workers and the informal economy. This broadcast is brought to you by Zim Papers TV network, ZTN, and our partners, the Labour and Economic Development Research Institute of Zimbabwe, Ledriz. Please also tune in to Economic Panorama on Capitalk Live every Thursday at 3 p.m. Samuel, let me come to you. You heard there, Honourable Chido. She's saying that, listen, she's open to dialogue. I will ask Peter what type of dialogue he is talking about when I come to him. But they're open to dialogue. They're open to ideas. She's inviting your organisation and others to approach her committee in Parliament and to come up with proposals and recommendations to discuss. But I think I'd also like to know, though, I mean, that's what government is doing. Let me ask you, Samuel, what are you doing? What is VISET doing to help your members survive this turbulent time?
Thank you, Andy. We've done a lot of work, and let me also take this opportunity to thank even the Minister for SMEs, because they assisted us to do some of the work that we did. When the government initially announced the lockdown last year in March, we quickly came in as an organization and ran a lot of awareness raising campaigns where we're basically educating our members on the dangers of the virus. There was, during the first lockdown, there was a lot of misinformation in terms of how people can contract the virus, how they can keep themselves safe and the other issues. So we came in using the guidelines that were put in place by the World Health Organization to just reach out to our members to ensure that they know the dangers of working from unsafe environments. We also made some donations in markets here in Harare, in Bulawayo, in Beitbridge, in Gweru. We went to those municipalities and we met with all the mayors during that time. We made some donations of PPEs to the markets that we're operating. We also conducted what we called market tours, just to visit the markets that were operating during that period, to have a feel of how traders are operating, the challenges that they are facing, the opportunities that are emerging. Because look, Andy, it's not only the challenges that we are focusing on here. There are opportunities that are also accruing. Like COVID has changed the way that we live as a people, globally. It's not only in Zimbabwe. So we have to be innovative. We're going to those markets to see how we can assist as an organization to ensure that post-COVID, we change the way that we do business as informal traders and contribute to the growth, not only for our businesses at an individual level, but also to the growth of the economy. But for us to be able to do that, we need also the support of the authorities. We need to be, given space for us to come with those solutions. So I want to also thank you, Honorable, for indicating that you are open for us to come and put on table our suggestions. We've developed a lot of concepts in terms of how we can decongest our big markets like Mpare, Chitima in Masingo. You mentioned Dilivadimu in Beitbridge. We've developed those concepts in terms of how we can decongest those markets. So we will be reaching out to you to share the ideas that we have so that post-COVID will be able to do business in a smart way, in a modern way, right, using technology and innovation.
That makes sense. I mean, dialogue is obviously key, and talk with them. You get better ahead when you talk to each other. Peter, let me ask you, and I'd ask you to be brief if you can, because we are coming to the end of our show. But what is your organisation doing to cushion workers during this trying time, and what role are you playing in the fight against COVID? But I also want to ask you a very specific question, which is important. Would you agree to utilize the ZCTU structures to get the message out in the near future about the vaccination program that's coming on? Would you help to spread the word, to help communicate about the vaccination program and whether Zimbabwean citizens should take it or not? So maybe you could answer those questions briefly, please.
Right, so it's tied up to the first question. What have you been doing? We have had challenges in terms of passage of trade unionists to their workplaces and to workplaces of workers. There was confusion, as you also saw with businesses, as to who is giving the exemption letters and which sectors are regarded as essential. So trade unions were not regarded as essential. So we raised the matter with the ministry, and some unions are now able to continue with their work. We are informing workers about their rights, occupational and certain health rights. So we are dealing with that. We have also set up a platform which we are running a COVID-19 series using our social media, the Facebook, Twitter, and WhatsApp, where we are holding dialogues with specialists, with experts, medical specialists for workers to get information, legal specialists, experts for workers to get their rights, and also to inform workers around issues. We have also continued to engage. Last week, we were engaging with parliamentarians, the portfolio committee chairperson of Health and Child Care, and an independent MP to get what we can gain from engagement through parliament. Unfortunately, unlike what we are hearing from the Honorable, those MPs told us that they were also in the dark. Even parliament was not being properly engaged. So we are doing all those things.
So, but Peter, let me get. Unfortunately, we are coming to the end of our show. But I just wanted to ask: would you actively participate if government requested in the information sharing to your workers and to citizens and members of your organisation in terms of the upcoming COVID-19 vaccine? Will you say now that you would contribute to be part of the communication chain, so to speak?
We are organized from the grassroots. We've got structures everywhere, districts and regions. So this is what we are actually demanding, that government must be transparent, must engage us so that we take through the information to the workers and we play our role. This is actually what we are demanding. The COVID-19 response must be inclusive. Government alone cannot achieve it. Labor alone and business cannot achieve it. So we are more than ready, but we need to have information, we need to participate effectively, which we don't have currently. We are shut out.
All right, okay. Now, unfortunately, this will be my final question, and I pose it to you, Chido. What advice would you give small and medium enterprises, even workers, in the informal sector? What advice would you give them to be able to survive and to grow and possibly thrive, especially after the COVID-19 second wave and people at least have an ability to start going back to work?
Okay, thank you, Auntie. The kind of advice that I would give SMEs is that let's follow government guidelines, because all what is happening, this is not to punish anyone. Let me say this is not to punish anyone, but it's in the best interest of us as a population, as a country, that we survive. So for those SMEs that really feel they can, they are structured enough, they have infrastructure in place to operate, for example, right now, they can still get the exemption letters and do their kind of the kind of business that they want to be doing. So this is my advice and to our SMEs.
And of course, Honourable, you did say something which I think is very important. Also, SMEs should start moving into the digital age, become more technology savvy, start selling their products online, because that is the wave under COVID-19. That's the new way of doing business.
Exactly. And I actually mentioned that, yes. For example, if you go to the Ministry of SMEs, they are pushing because we cannot run away from technology. This is the new ways of doing things. And in the new way of doing things, we cannot exclude our SMEs because they don't have capacity, or they are there. There should be a lot of awareness, a lot of capacity building for this kind of technology, for us to move to e-commerce, where they can sell even online. They can still continue to do their business. And
right.
Let me say, and you talked about the vaccination program that government is working on, and government has clearly said it's targeting the vulnerable. Most of the people that are being besides our frontline officers, our frontline workers, our elder, it's also the vulnerable, and our SMEs are included in the vulnerable.
Right.
So it means a lot of our SMEs will be targeted for this kind of program. So these are some of the issues. But we cannot run away from technology. If you look at these big companies, most of them are at home. And the people are at home and they are selling millions and millions of things. they are continuing with their business.
Right.
So,
Unfortunately, Chido, we have to end it there. And on that note, we have come to the end of our program. You've been watching the Mint Special Economic Panorama, our virtual discussion this afternoon: COVID-19 second wave, perspectives from workers and the informal economy. This broadcast is brought to you by Zim Papers TV network ZTN and our partners, the Labour and Economic Development Research Institute of Zimbabwe, Ledriz. Don't miss Economic Panorama on Capi Talk live every Thursday at 3 p.m. I would like to thank our guest today, Deputy Minister, that would be Samuel Wadzai, Executive Director at the Vendors Initiative for Social and Economic Transformation, VISET, Peter Mutasa, President of the Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions, and Honorable Chido Madiwa. She is the Chairperson of the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee, which looks specifically at women's affairs, SMEs, and of course the informal sector, SME development. Thank you very much for being part of the Mint Special. A final comment. Self-employed workers, micro-enterprises and small and medium-sized enterprises create jobs and improve livelihoods in Zimbabwe. Of that, the evidence is clear. The COVID-19 pandemic has, however, disproportionately affected these sectors, and it is these sectors that are most affected from lockdowns. Vendors, workers in all other sectors, both formal and informal, have suffered job losses, loss of income, and in some cases reduced wages as businesses struggle to survive. COVID-19 has only made survival harder for Zimbabwean SMEs. The smallest enterprises are usually run by women and operate in the informal economy and therefore lack proper social protection. Commentators state that exposure to the COVID-19 virus may also be higher amongst vendors and informal workers due to the very nature of their business. Zimbabwe needs a vibrant small and medium enterprises sector. It needs productive workers. It needs an informal sector that is able to thrive and in which citizens can make a living, possibly under a more structured framework, however. These sectors play a key and vital role in the success or failure of the entire Zimbabwean economy. Zimbabweans in those sectors are actually you and me, and we must never forget that. I'm Andy Hodges. Goodbye, have a great weekend, and you all be safe.